morning again. Thank you. I should start by saying thank you so much for making your way so quickly into the plenary hall and helping us make up a little bit of time. As with everything, the conferences are always a evolving animal. I think those who have children understand that. You plan on leaving at 10 and you eventually leave at 11 instead. So thank you again for your cooperation. We have coming up here in this session is the Women in Leadership panel, which I'm quite looking forward to getting the opportunity to hear. And at the same time, we have the presentations upstairs as well. Now, if you wanted to see the presentations and the Women in Leadership panel, obviously you can't do it at the same time. Again, don't worry, we have you covered. Can anyone tell me where they can go to access the platform? Someone said on the website, correct, or on the back of your lanyard. I sometimes question, I repeat myself over and over again, and there's a reason, to make sure that you retain that information and get the most out of this conference as possible. Now, I mentioned there's plenty of content available, and that's spoken content. There's also plenty of content available in print form or online. We have the QS Yearbook 2023. If you're wondering, how did we get here in 2024 for the World University Rankings? I know we're in the year 2023, but how did we get here for the rankings? Well, that yearbook is a great way to look back on an entire year's worth of rankings, starting from the World University Rankings 2023 all the way to the Subject Rankings 2023, as well as some really great abridged and shortened articles from some of the magazines that we've put together over the past year as well. There's 12 magazines in total. I take responsibility for that yearbook as well as the insights. If you want to learn a little bit more about the World University Rankings that was just released as well, you can of course go to topuniversities.com to see all those ranks. If you like a little bit of an oral history from 20 years ago, or over the 20-year history of the rankings, as well as a bit more of an explainer as to some of the changes that we've made to the methodology, then that is your go-to resource. You can sign up for an account, join our community, learn more as we go along. Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome Professor Colin Scott, the Vice President for Equity, Diversity and Inclusion at University College, who will be moderating the next session. Thank you very much. My apologies, we were waiting on the mic. So you had to listen to me speak a little bit longer. Any questions for me?
How tall are you?
I am 6'2". I absolutely can. Yes, so okay. So the IUA reception that's happening later this evening is by RSVP only. If you haven't RSVP'd, unfortunately we have just reached the maximum. If you have RSVP'd, I mentioned a little bit earlier, it says it starts at 6:30. I know this audience, because you were here way before I even made it into the room, you're all very, very prompt. The doors won't be available, won't be open until 6:15, and even then they'll need to set up. So sit back, relax, have some conversations, enjoy yourself, and then we'll be able to celebrate what will have been QS Higher Ed Summit 2023. Now, after that little bit of ado, no further of it, please, the panel. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here on this panel on this very important topic of women in leadership in higher education. We've got a wonderful panel of speakers here who I'm going to be asking some questions of. And I'm just going to set the scene a little bit before we begin with our participants. You'll all be aware that in many countries, a majority of our students are women. And this is also true for professional administrative job roles. And increasingly, this is likely to be true for academic roles as well. And yet, higher education institutions remain stubbornly dominated by men with respect to senior academic roles and leadership. Over the last 20 years, the makeup of university leadership teams has seen a substantial increase in the proportion of women, but no one thinks there is gender equality in higher education yet. And it's not simply a matter of course, who's in the leadership, it's also a matter of culture, culture of inclusion and belonging that enables us all to flourish, many challenges still to face. US data speaks to only a third of full professorships being held by women, and in the EU and the UK the figure is more like 25%. When it comes to senior leadership roles, such as President, Rector, Vice-Chancellor of the universities, which have been identified by Times Higher in the top 200 globally in 2023, 48, fewer than 1/4, are led by women. We've made some progress in Ireland recently, and more than half our universities here are led by women. We've also made progress in the proportion of women in senior academic roles, and indeed in the proportion of women in senior professional roles. But there are many challenges still to face. This panel will explore the decisions universities should take in meeting the goal of gender equality in leadership and the need to draw in wider challenges of intersectionality of gender with race and with other equality grounds. And on our panel, we have 4 women with wide-ranging experience of participation in and engagement with universities and the challenges of equality with respect to gender, race, and other equality grounds. Without any further delay, I shall introduce our first panelist and ask her a question. Mary Connolly, who's sitting to my left, is the Director of Human Rights, Equality, Diversity and Inclusion at the University of Limerick. She was appointed as the inaugural Director of Human Rights, Equality, Diversity and Inclusion in 2021. And amongst many career distinctions, Dr. Connolly led the process toward the University of Limerick's Institutional Silver Athena Swan Award earlier this year, the first such award in Ireland, which is a fantastic distinction. So, Mary, I'm going to ask you, where do you think we are in terms of enhancing gender equality in higher education leadership?
So, thanks, Colin. Thanks for the introduction. I think we certainly have moved significantly from when, just not even that long ago, 2015, we had 81% of professorships in the Irish higher education sector were by men. Over 70% of our professional managerial staff were female, and the higher paid levels of professional managerial staff, over 72% were held by men, despite the fact that women absolutely are overrepresented in the sector. But we have moved, as you signified there, Colin. Finally, we have women as presidents and provosts of our university. May have taken 420 years in Trinity College to have their first female president, Professor Linda Doyle. I'm delighted to say UL was the first. We like being the first. So we were the first to appoint a female president with President Kirsten May. And as Colin has mentioned, UCD and Maynooth appointed women, and now the new technological universities. I think you have to have women at decision making to make a difference. And it's wonderful to see women leading the institutions. But there's still a lot to be done. We can't talk about women in leadership in the Irish higher education sector without going back to Mary Mitchell O'Connor. I think she and other powerful women in the sector did a lot to highlight the misogynistic environment that women were working in. How when women had to take breaks for family and to take maternity breaks, that their careers really suffered. Mary Mitchell O'Connor brought in the first gender task force and highlighted that it was going to take at least 20 years for us ever to advance if she hadn't put in positive action like the SALI Academic Leadership Initiative, which has really focused minds. And also following on that, we had brought in the Athena Swan framework, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But that again focused minds because it absolutely presented data, and we needed the data and not just top level data. We needed to really deep delve into the data, from recruitment to promotions to selection to what we were doing in that space. So I think we have moved significantly, but we have a lot yet to do.
Thanks, Mary, that's super. I'm going to next introduce Susan Fang. Susan is Director and Founder at Academic Powerhouse and is recognised in the International Education Top 50 Voices for 2023. Susan is very much an entrepreneur and educational consultant with very wide international experience engaging with higher education institutions, with student recruitment, and with wider relationship building. Susan, could I ask you, you've this long experience working alongside higher education institutions across the globe. What has struck you about the way that women's careers in higher education have developed in the international education sector?
Well, thank you, Colin, for the introduction. Good morning, everybody. So before jumping into this question, I think it might be useful for me to give a bit of context as to what my company does and who our counterparts are in the higher ed sector. So I started OxBridge 21 years ago in Taiwan, and since then my company has been recruiting international students from the East Asia region to about 120 UK universities for mainly long-term academic courses, so undergraduate and postgraduate courses. So our immediate counterpart at universities are usually non-academic staff who are administrative and management professionals in the international office, and they're involved in international student recruitment. So work in the international office often involves a lot of traveling abroad, attending exhibitions, meeting students and parents, and of course out-of-hour communication with their partners like ourselves to accommodate the long distance and also time differences. So in the heyday of pre-pandemic times, the most active international officers could possibly spend 2/3 of their time of a year abroad or traveling. So usually, after 2 to 3 full cycles of doing this international student recruitment, these officers will move on to a more senior roles that will probably take on more management responsibilities, or it could with or without traveling. And after 3 to 5 years, they will move up again on their career ladder. They will not be on the road as much in terms of recruiting students, and they will become heads, deputy directors, and so forth. So as they move up the chain of command, they increasingly stay office-bound. And so the team will see them, my team and myself will see them rare so in sort of outside of the UK, in Asia. So from my 2 decades of observation, male and female officers are in equal numbers when they first start out as an international officer. But as they move on to the next level up, females drop off considerably. Well, I understand, frequent travel takes its toll, and I would have expected that officers, whether it's male or female, as they move up the senior management level, they want to take less travelings around. But when we visit the university counterparts on campus, we do realize that the female colleagues that we're so used to normally are not there anymore. So let me share some interesting stats from BUCA. BUCA is the British University China Association. So it is formed by UK universities with very active China-facing international recruitment team. So of the BUCA members currently, 64% of all East Asian recruitment roles are held by female colleagues. However, when it comes to leading international officers, in terms of the role of the head or deputy director or directors of the international office, only 10% of these roles are held by female. Shocking. So this has always been the status quo, and I guess it's the reason why we're here today to have this discussion.
Thanks so much, Susan, for raising that. And I particularly appreciate that whilst often the headline figures are about academic data, I particularly appreciate you drawing in the importance of the professional and support roles in higher education, because we wouldn't be able to do what we do in higher education without the work of professional support roles, and the leadership there is just as important as the leadership amongst our academics. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to pass on now and introduce Dr. Ebun Joseph. Ebun is Director of the Institute of Antiracism Black Studies, founder and chairperson at the African Scholars Association of Ireland. Ebun has a PhD in Equality Studies from UCD School of Social Justice and has lectured in Trinity College Dublin, University College Dublin, and amongst the publications is a very well-received book, Critical Race Theory and Inequality in the Labour Market, Racial Stratification in Ireland, published with Manchester University Press in 2020, which deploys a stratification framework to better understand the pervasiveness of racial inequality in employment. So, Ebun, you've strong interest and expertise in the intersection of race and gender and how this affects equality in higher education, arguing that much of what universities do to address equality, diversity and inclusion tends to advance the careers of white women. Could you explain for us first the concept of intersectionality and in particular then how that challenges universities to do better, do different?
Thank you so much, and it's brilliant to be here today. Maybe I'll start, like I observed, the whole of the talk yesterday. Everybody mentioned intersectionality. I'm like, okay, so everybody's talking about it. But if we were doing intersectionality in the academy, we wouldn't be here today. The conversation about diversity and inclusion in the academy would not even take place if we were actually doing intersectionality. So that was the first trigger for me to say, okay, we know the word. How are we using the word? How are we able to integrate it, into the system? When we talk about gender, when we want to look at this whole issue, so we talked about gender, we've talked about, how, women are doing better now. I'm like, okay, women are doing better. I'm like thinking, women from my community, are they doing better? Women from the traveler community, are they doing better? Women from the Roma community, are they doing better? Women who are from Eastern Europe, are they doing, do you see? So when you begin to trickle down there, women with a disability, are they doing better? So when we say women are doing better, it's fantastic. It might be 50-50, but when we stay on that level, so we talk about no one left behind. So what intersectionality tries to do is to make sure that those invisible people who don't have the voice, because remember, race, all the isms is about power. Isms cannot take place without power. So there are a group of people who have the power within the system. So if those who have the power are those who are still in positions, then we have, we have defeated the whole purpose of saying, oh, women are in there. So, we look at, we say women are there. How many, it's looking at how many are from other groups that are within there. So one of the things, I'll tell you what intersectionality is not. So first and foremost, intersectionality is not diversity and inclusion. It's not a synonym, it's not another word for diversity and inclusion. That's not what intersectionality is. Intersectionality is not about identities. While it looks at our social identities and how it impacts on our outcome, it is not about identities, it's about inequality. So that's what intersectional is about, inequality, the power dynamics that ensures that some people have more than others. So when we begin to look at all of that, so it's not even about, bringing, okay, so we say, oh, different identities. Okay, so we'll say, okay, she's black, she's gay. So it's not about adding different inequalities together. So it's not about that. So but it's about looking at how different identities interact to create a unique identity that creates a unique set of experiences. And the experiences are so hidden that you are not able to address them. When this concept was first developed by Kimberly Crenshaw, she used an intersection. It's like a car is going down the road, and there's a woman in the middle of the road. Suddenly there's a mishap, and all the traffic lights says go, and all the 4 cars at the front go at the same time, and they bash the woman in the middle, right? If I had time, I would, go for, we don't have the time. So, but the woman is in the middle, and the guy is saying there, so who are we going to call? What are we going to do? There's a woman in the middle, and 4 cars have hit her. What do we do? What are we going to do? So he said, it's you. So you came from that way. Do you see? So we're trying to say, it's you, it's you. In the meantime, what's happening to the woman? What's happening to the woman? She's what? She's dying. She's bleeding out. But we're trying to decide who hit her because all 4 cars moved at the same time. So we cannot determine whether it was race that hit her. Was it because she was of African descent that hit her? Was it because she was because she was black that hit her? Was it because she was LGBTQ that hit her? We don't know. So 4 things. So it's just interlocking identities when they attack you at the same time. we don't know what. Because if we say it's race, they'll say, no, there are black men who are professors in Ireland. Then we say, okay, it's gender. They say, no, there are white women in the, so I'm like, so I can't explain why, with as amazing as I am, I don't have a, you know, so I can't explain why, as amazing as I am, I don't have a full academic role. Do you see? The only way I can explain it is my, you know, racialized identity as a black woman. So my voice is strong. Do you know? So it's that identity that keeps, so you're locked out, because if you say it's woman, white women are there. If you say it's men, black men are there. And so when we begin to look at this issue of intersectionality, black women, which is where it came from, they fall through the cracks. And I think sometimes what saddens me is the fact that, you know, intersectionality, even diversity and inclusion, came about because we said, you know, people of color, you know, were marginalized, over-marginalized. Yet when we talk about intersectionality today, race barely makes it into that list. When we talk, you know, so it barely makes it into the list.
Thanks, Ebun. That's a fantastic explanation of where we are with the challenge, not yet getting into the question of what to do. We'll come back to that in a moment. Thank you. I'd like to finally introduce Bolanle Tajuddin, who is the founder and director at Black Blossoms. So Bolanle is a curator, a cultural activist and entrepreneur based in the UK who works alongside art galleries, including Tate, and also alongside higher education institutions in championing marginalised art histories. Her Black Blossom School of Art and Culture curates affordable, accessible online courses that aim to decolonise, deconstruct and democratise the education system. So Bolanle, you've very significant experience working alongside universities in developing cultural activities and programmes. What do you see as the barriers and opportunities for women and minoritised groups in advancing their careers, especially for entrepreneurs and innovators?
Thank you so much. It's such a privilege to talk on this panel, and especially after Dr. Ebun. A bit of background as to why I started Black Blossoms. I was a student in University of the Arts London, so I think it's second on the list on the QS ranking. And ultimately, I had a great time. However, that's when I really started to understand intersectionality and understand how myself as a understand how being a black person, being a woman, being a single parent, and all of these other intersecting identities was affecting me and affecting the outcomes that I had. And I remember learning about the attainment gap in my last year and thinking, oh, I haven't had a single black tutor throughout not only my secondary and my university education, but also my secondary education. And I had one black teacher in primary school. And then it all started to like, I remember reading Kimberly Crenshaw, Patricia Hill Colin. So I was really reading a lot of black feminist texts. And I was angry. I had every right to be angry and upset. And I had ran for education officer of my student union, and I had won overwhelmingly. And that year, as a sabbatical officer, I was engaging with the university about ways they could improve their curriculum, make it more diverse. And it wasn't necessarily falling on deaf ears, because you know there was a lot of things happening at the time in society. But I just didn't feel like it was happening fast enough. I remember having a meeting with a couple of the vice chancellors, and they were like, oh, you know, change takes about 10 years. And I was like, we don't have 10 years. But now that I look back, I can see why it really does take 10 years. And then whilst I was a sabbatical officer, I decided to start Black Blossoms, and at the time it was an expanded curatorial platform. So we would do exhibitions and like talks and conferences. And it never felt enough, like curating art exhibitions. I'm really good at it. I really enjoy that side of my work, but I never felt like, okay, this is what's going to make changes to the world or impact people's lives. It just felt, you know, the art world in and of itself is like one of the most hardest industries to operate in. it already closes the doors on working class people, black people. So it just never felt that, I never felt that this is the thing, you know. And then I was teaching at that time. I actually had done a PCG cert at UAE. I was invited back to do a PCG cert. And my final major project was on how short courses in social justice could improve the attainment of students of colour, which is really interesting in learning, because I only found out yesterday about the micro credentials, and that's basically what I was arguing for in my final major project. And you know, it was such a great idea, but the university obviously didn't buy into it. And then the pandemic happened in 2020. And I had been teaching at Tate at this time. I had very good industry contacts, and I decided, oh, okay, I'm going to teach online, because I used to have so many people message me about wanting to do my courses. And I'd done my first course online, which is Art in the Age of Black Girl Magic, which is the area that I specialize in. So it's looking at black feminist art practices and non-binary people, including trans women as well. And I was like, oh, I know so many amazing like black and POC doctors and artists and lecturers. I can just expand Black Blossoms and like make it the School of Art and Culture. And yeah, it's been a vibe since then. We've had like over 600 students. We've partnered with Tate, Art on the Underground. We've House Orleans Gallery, so we've part South London Gallery. So we partner with really prestigious art institutions. And we are getting some buy-in from university, but obviously our courses are not accredited. They are short 4-week course, even though I do think the level of which the teaching is at is quite academic. You know, sometimes I find that institutions, education institutions find it's not as easy for them to say, okay, yeah, come in and run a course, because they've obviously got degree programs and short courses that they're already like developing. And partnerships are the most important thing that Black Blossoms does. I don't think without the partnerships that especially the Art on the Underground partnership that we had last year. We had posters all over the underground. We were responding to the artistic commissions from the Art on the Underground curators. And it really allows Black Blossoms to further its mission of teaching contemporary art histories from lenses that are often overlooked in the art world, and telling different stories about art and culture. And even though I've always felt that curating art exhibitions was never enough, I am adamant that art and culture is a way to create a more equal society, because that's how we essentially become or understand the world around us. And so, yeah, I'm happy to have been able to join my two favourite things together, which is art and education.
Thanks, Melania. What I'm very struck by is that you identified a learning need and found a way to fill that gap with the short courses that you're running, and doing that on your own through Black Blossoms. And here, you know, many of us got whole institutional structures and struggle to achieve what you've achieved, you know, with that innovation. And so it's fantastic to hear about it. Thank you. So as a good moderator, I hope I've got lots and lots of questions for the panelists, but we'd also like to hear questions from you. So I'm going to do another round of questions with the panelists, but we'll then come to you to ask you for questions that you may have for our panelists. I don't want you to miss out on the opportunity to ask them questions. So I'll come back to Mary, if I may. So Mary, we hear in the equality world a lot of talk about a leaky pipeline for women in academic careers. Could you briefly talk about what the leaky pipeline is, and how the kind of steps you've taken in the Athena Swan Silver process are addressing the leaky pipeline for women academic careers, and indeed women professional careers?
Yeah, and when you look at the data, it's so evident. Like percentages are balanced at early stage academic levels. In fact, women are slightly overrepresented at lecture level or lecture below the bar level. You start to see the leaky pipeline going from lecturer to senior lecturer, and then it gets even more obvious from senior lecturer to associate professor level. And that back in 2019 in the sector, that drop was from 52% to 37% at associate professor level and to 26% at full professorial level. So what Athena's One has done for us is the demand to analyse the data. And nobody can argue with data, while it has taken all of our institutions substantial work and time to actually present true data. So within our Silver institution, we looked at the data and we could very clearly see in UL where the drop-off was. And it was to do with breaks in service, predominantly to do with breaks in service for carers. So we introduced back in 2016 the research grant for returning academic carers. This was for both males and females because some males also have challenges if they're caring for parents or dependent children. Suffice to say that no male has actually availed of the research grant for returning academic carers. Because you have to have had taken at least 20 weeks leave and then you return. And what we've done is 6 months protective leave, protective from teaching on return to catch up on your research. The knock-on effect of that has been substantial. So we've seen an increase of actually in our associate professor levels, 146% increase in numbers from women that got that protected time from teaching to focus on the research, to catch up on the research, and then to prepare, which is an undertaking itself, a successful professor, associate professor, or senior lecturer portfolio to go forward for promotions. We also looked at the promotions policy and procedure because it wasn't clear why there was gaps or why somebody's outputs weren't as high as they had been in previous years. So it was very clear to say to women, you need to identify that you are on leave and this is why, and then we need to get the panels to look at, well, a woman was maybe had 4 Q-star publications in the 2 years prior to the leave, and then it fell, but that was why. So the gaps were explained, and we have seen that now, as I say, the huge level of increase in those applying for promotion, because women finally felt that, okay, I will go forward because there is opportunity and it is being taken seriously, and my leave is taken into account when assessing my promotions. And so the increase, we saw a 93% success rate for women in UL applying for from senior lecturer to associate professor level. And it is, and they would all say it is, putting in interventions like this that see where the issues are and address those issues.
Thanks, Mary. I know you've spoken about a small part of Athena Swan. It is, as you say, many, many different interventions that are all pushing in the same direction around building a stronger culture for the institution. Thank you. Susan, you spoke about the leaky pipeline with the professional staff you saw in the international education environment. I wonder if you could speak a bit about the implications of that. What are the implications for universities when they're losing, key staff and they're not seeing women progress into senior roles? From your perspective, what do you see and what are the challenges around it? But then what would be the opportunities that are not yet being taken up?
So again, before attempting to answer this, I think I want to give it more of a context. So the workforce in study abroad advisory or agency in particular, this sector links more to women professionals. So in my company, for example, 95% of the frontline counselors are actually female. So when recruiting for the new blood for the counseling team, we received 9 out of 10 resumes, CVs, are actually from female candidates. So this is the background context. And the markets that we're in, particularly China, Taiwan, they are predominantly sources of postgraduate applicants coming into the UK. So these are either fresh graduates or students who actually been in work for a few years and then decided to take time off work and advance in their career by doing a second degree. So from our experience again, our clientele of student cohorts tend to be more female than male, and usually this ratio is about 6 female to 4 male. So naturally, from our experience, female students feel more comfortable when they're being counseled by female counselors or interacting with female counselors. And henceforth, if from the university, the international officers interacting with a female candidate, if they are female, the comfort level will also heighten. So I think this is a very positive motivation for universities to consider whether to put more female frontline officers when they're going out to the market, or even just interacting with the students as well as, for example, our staff dealing with the frontline counseling. Because then female counselors, female students will have more affinity with the female officers that are working hand in hand. So this is just seen as a sort of opposite angle, rather than saying there is a definitive inequality issue in university. But if we flip it and say, if we encourage more female officers to stay on their job and do, possibly balancing that with the traveling, because these days there is a lot of work can be done online, over Zoom, over Teams, possibly there could be higher retention of students and helping the female students convert. Because when female students, particularly seeing that they have a role model in front of them, speaking to somebody who's also been there, and possibly from the same racial background, ethnicity background as themselves, they can actually imagine 5 years, 10 years down the line, once they've completed their degree overseas in that study abroad destination market, they too have that opportunity to become that person they're speaking to today. So if, in effect, they are seeing a role model. So I always believe that the power is within ourselves to act as a role model. As a female, as a woman entrepreneur, a leader, we constantly have to act on behalf of many people, and it is our duty to actually show it to others, possibly younger females, that this can be done. So I want to flip it from the other angle, rather than saying, pointing out there's an issue, but why don't we encourage universities to say, possibly we offer more opportunities to put more female, to empower female officers to the front, so that they can actually help speak to more female students out there who we know are actually in the dominance.
Thanks, Susan. So, Ebun, you've a strong specialism in employment and pay and related things, and we know that notwithstanding a formal commitment in law in the EU to gender pay equality over decades, we know there's a big gender pay gap, and the UK has been reporting gender pay gap in universities and large employers for a number of years. Ireland, we did it for the first time in December of 2022, have gender pay gap reporting, and there's a big gap. But to an extent, gender pay gap reporting has hidden the pay gaps experienced by other minority groups, in particular by minority ethnic groups. I wonder if you could say something from your experience about the challenges of pay and progression for minority ethnic groups and what we should be doing about it in the universities.
Yeah, and thank you so much. And that's so important. Every university now is looking for international students. Like, we're looking for international students. Yet our students come here and they go through 4 years, 5 years of our university, and they don't see anybody that looks like them. So we're trying to tackle racism, but our university actually teaches racism. That's what we do. Because what we're actually teaching you is that these people who look like this, what you can do with them, yes, they can go through our schools, but the only jobs we can give them is cleaning jobs, and even when we get them in, we bring them in as a guest lecturer, one lecture, and you're gone. And even when we get them teaching 2 modules, which is half of a full role, you don't teach it as a staff, you teach it as a per hour. So you don't have an office, so you are very incompetent, you're rushing into because I did tell somebody that, with that money, I can earn more flipping burgers. Yes, because if you're being paid per hour, you're teaching, but you're teaching 2 modules, compared to what a full job is, a full professorship job, which is 4 modules. You're teaching 2 modules, but you're coming in, so you're rushing, you're late, and all of those things. You don't have an office, so you don't have time to give extras. So you don't have research funding, so you can't do research. So your career is damaged from the minute you graduate from the program. You know, so we look at, and when we're looking at data, and I think I said that in the data lecture yesterday, when we're looking at data, you want to look at the number of people from these communities that go through our education system, and you want to compare the progression. What percentage of them progress into academic roles? You know, because every time we talk about, you know, we get it when it comes to women. I think I said it yesterday. Imagine if you came into a gender course and all the lecturers were male. There'd be mayhem. Yet we go through a sociology department, we go through an education department, we go through schools teaching on community, society, and there's nobody who looks like me lecturing. So what happens is that people like my children who grew up here, you know, Kataji Wilson called it, you know, the miseducation of the black mind, the Negro person, that when they go through the education, it means that they never learn about their own identities. We're talking about decolonizing the Korean. I get like they don't get, but they bring me in to come and, you know, pay me to come and lecture that. I'm like, it don't make sense. I charge you big money to come and lecture there. Instead of giving me the role and you own me, but I'm happy they don't own me. Do you know what I mean? But they own your time. Do you understand what I mean? So we find all of those processes. So when you look at the pipeline, you know, it's absolutely leaking. From my community, I can tell you 99% of my community were in the industry. I had to, you know, when I got to a point, I said, you know what, I can't be teaching one module here. I was teaching across 4 universities, 4. In 2020, I said, this can't work. I got to an age where I said, okay, no, I can choose now. You know, and I resigned all the jobs and set up the Institute of Antiracism and Black Studies. So now I go to businesses and I teach, you know, anti-racism in businesses, teach Black Studies, you know, do all of that, you know. And for me, that's really effective. But I think it's a massive loss because I teach critical race theory. I don't see real, proper, strong critical race theory in Ireland. You know, we talk about the racialized identity. I say, but that's not race. Race is different from racialized identities. You know, so when I think we've watered down that because you can't check everywhere. It's only in Ireland I see this. I've been to Canada, it doesn't happen there. I've been to the UK, I've been to the US, it doesn't happen there. If you don't have the strong voices from these communities, there are things we can say. They said, if I teach race and you teach, I will say exactly the same thing. When I say it, people hear something different. Not because I'm saying anything different, but because people interpret what I say in a different way.
Thanks very much. Bolanle, you've spoken about imposter syndrome as something that can hold people back in developing their careers. And I wonder if you could talk to us about how we can tackle imposter syndrome, especially for black women, women of colour in higher education, and especially in supporting people into leadership positions.
Yeah, I guess when I first started Black Blossoms, not necessarily the school, I just always used to think, oh, I'm not the right person to be here. You know, like I said, the arts is a very white, middle-class space. And I think not only are black women, I think women of colour, anyone that doesn't fit the standard box can feel like they don't belong. And I recently read something that actually there's no such thing as imposter syndrome. It's just actually that space wasn't built for you to actually survive and thrive within that space. So, you know, you wasn't in mind when that space was being built. And I think the most important thing that we can do to kind of make sure that we are supporting women into leadership positions is women sticking together. Like, I think it was really great to hear about the kind of funding that women get after having a child. Like those kind of initiatives, when women get into power, like we have to keep on practicing these like radical feminist principles, intersectional feminist principles, and really pushing for ourselves and advocating for ourselves to be there. And yeah, we need allies like men as well to keep on like making sure that all women are centered in the fight for equality and thinking about who isn't centered and why. I was talking about it to someone yesterday. I never really wanted to run my own business. It wasn't something, I didn't go to university to learn I studied public relations. I studied politics at Leeds for a year. Then I went to University of the Arts London and studied public relations. I really wanted to just work in like policy. You know, I wanted to be behind the scenes. I never wanted to become an entrepreneur. It's like by force. And I guess that comes with its own sets of challenges, just taxes, to having to deal with different teams, different people, and no one. I do read a lot of books. I listen also to a lot of podcasts, but it's something that I've had to really teach myself. Like, how do I be a good? Because you can be a good leader. Sometimes I think I am not a good manager. Sometimes I think I don't necessarily manage the teams that I have to work with well, but in terms of leading and people believing in the vision that I have, I think I excel at that. And it's just a constant state of teaching. So I think we need more sort of inside institutions, because more institutions like that Athena Swan, I think it's actually so radical, like that parents come back and they have 6 months to just breathe themselves back into positions. And that's the kind of initiatives that we need more standardized across higher education. Yeah.
Thanks very much indeed. So I said I'll see some questions in the audience. That moment has come. There's a question here. Do you have some microphones? Thanks very much, Sean. I'm going to take a couple of questions, I think, and then come back to the panel, because otherwise I'll be in trouble with the organisers around lunch. So I'll take 2 or 3 questions and then come back to the panel for responses and final words. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Kellyanne, the Class Foundation. Firstly, I just wanted to thank you for mentioning imposter syndrome. I've always felt like I've had imposter syndrome, and I also have recently read lots of articles that it isn't our fault and that it is a makeup of our surroundings. So I'm just here to kind of reiterate that it is not our fault at all. It is not us, it's them. So I'm just putting it out there. Secondly, I also wanted to thank QS for the diverse representative of all of the women that have been on the stage over the last 2 days. I think it's been amazing, and I have noticed it, so hands up to QS for sure. What I kind of wanted to ask the panelists was, so obviously we're going to be facing challenges over the next couple of years. What do you think is the most important thing that people in this room can do to help eradicate, get rid of, and also endorse women in leadership positions going forward?
Thanks very much. We'll hold on to that question and see if there's 1 or 2 more questions. Such a good question. What's the most important thing we should all do? Maybe that's it. We're all getting a bit hungry. Well, I'll go back. 1 more question, though? Yeah, there's a question here.
Hi, thanks for that. I just want to know, maybe you can give some advice on the balance between making structural changes, things like requirements on boards, legislated and regulated changes, against sort of normative kind of actions and sort of empathetic actions. I have a sense that, you know, hardline writing and rules matter. I'd just like you to maybe help me on that one. Thanks.
Thanks so much. That's another great question. So I'll put the 2 questions to the panel. Maybe take that second question first. What's a good balance to think of between structures and rules to advance equality, diversity, inclusion, and indeed to anti-racism? And as between what's the balance between structure on the one hand and the more cultural, softer things on the other? For question 1. And then the second question, what's the one thing, the most important thing that people in the room can and should be doing? So maybe we'll start in reverse and ask Bolanle to go first. With either or both.
So, yeah, I really like your question, what can we be doing? I do think, I'm definitely thinking about the UK. I'm always on social media, I love Twitter. And I'm thinking about how in 2017, how much more radical people were in terms of feminism and being very feminist and being a proud feminist. And now we're in a situation where we have people like Andrew Tate really having conversations around masculinities and what it means to be a man in society, and therefore what role should women play in that. And I do think as we start to see teenage boys, specifically Gen Z, boys get older, I am really interested to see how that thinking starts to trickle down in the world of employment. And, you know, not to say not all women have caring responsibilities or are mothers, but I think it's really about tackling attitudes within young people, and providing sort of different discourses for them to see how feminism doesn't just help women, it actually helps men to be, whether or not you want to call it more masculine, but it allows men to be men without engaging in toxic masculinity. So that's just, I know there's going to be another, like, more ranges of opinion around what we can be doing, but I think we should focus on, there should be a focus on young people. And in terms of like structures, yeah, I agree. I do think universities and any kind of employment place should have, we need 50% women, we need 30% to be black, we need to, alongside publishing our our gender pay gap, we need to publish the racial pay gap. I think these things should become standardized practices. And I think more of us should just be confident in talking about money and power anyway, because that's how you make changes. I know the UK has like a very like stiff upper lip in talking about money with each other and how much people earn. But once you start to understand that, oh, this person's getting this amount and this person's getting this amount, you start to understand so much disparities that are happening across society, and that's what allows us to make the changes that we need.
Thanks, Blanley. We have about 40 seconds each left for the panelists. Ebun, can I ask you next?
So I'll just quickly say, because I'm watching the time as well. So key thing, you know, men sponsor men. You know, men sponsor, that's been researched and it's been shown. So if we want to make those changes, women need to begin to sponsor women. You know, so when an opening has been made for women, when you sit on that table as a white woman, you need to remember your sisters that are not white, who don't have the power, who are not on those tables. You can't, you know, we call it Ubuntu. You know, if I'm not okay, if you're not okay, I'm not okay. So we must take that attitude. When we sit on the table and policies are being made, you must remember, okay, which women have, and say that, okay, how do we make sure that all women benefit from this, you know, that, you know, so men sponsor men, women need to begin to sponsor women, and then men need to also begin to sponsor women. Sponsor those, I'm not saying mentoring, we're over-mentored out, so sponsoring, so sponsor women. Education is key. Our third-level institutions must begin to teach anti-racism as compulsory, a compulsory element. DEI must be a core element from first year, everybody. We can't wait until they are line managers. They must get it from their first year and go through that system. I think so those two key things for me are really, really important that we get in.
Thanks so much, Ebun. Susan?
And I'd like to add that it's an ongoing issue, that we can't be complacent, that we're seeing more women at the top table and say that the job is done. No, we need to continue. It's not a battle, it's just something that you want it, you have to strive for it. And it is known that there is a confidence disparity between men and women. I think Hewlett-Packard years ago released this report saying that when men is confident, about 60% confident that they can do a job, they'll go for their job and vote and be very vocal about wanting that job. However, women, on the other hand, will have to wait. You know, they wait for their 100% confidence in what they can do, then they will become vocal. I say no to that. I say more women should just be out there and be more vocal and let yourself shine. I think we, as a sort of industry, need to encourage more women and be understanding of the fact that some women will be more hesitant to come forward, but coax them, encourage them to come forward, because possibly they have a lot more to offer than what they made out to be. So don't be complacent.
Thanks so much. And Mary?
Fine. I think we need more male champions, to be honest. I've spent many, many years working in equality, and it's always women talking to women. In our most recent Athena Swan application, we could see it was 2 to 1 those that were volunteering to take on additional duties in EDI. Men were not seeing it as being a valuable contribution. It wasn't recognised in our workload allocation model. It is now. So there's no point in one gender or wider genders. We need engagement. I do think also we need responsibility and accountability. It was actually one of the key things of why we got a Silver Institution Award, was because of our robust governance, that the senior leaders of the institution need to be leading the EDI agenda. Without that, you're not going to get engagement throughout, and I think it's really important. Picking up on Ebun's point, we need data. We need to give the trust to individuals to come forward to tell us what is their ethnic background, so we can look at the correlation between promotions, between salary. We don't have that data, but those coming from ethnic backgrounds obviously don't trust why we want that data. So we've got to build that trust. So I think to make significant change, we don't need quotas, but we do need balanced promotions panels, we do need balanced recruitment panels, and we need to know what are the stats, and we need to analyse those stats.
Thanks very much. So we've heard today from 4 wonderful professionals and innovators, but being on a panel like this also means bringing yourself in and talking about yourself, which I think takes some courage, which I really, really appreciate. We've heard so many interesting things and challenges for us to take away in the sector. So Belanle, Susan, Ebun, Mary, we're indebted to you on behalf of everyone here and everyone online. Thank you so much for your contributions today. And as I say in cricket, I think that's now lunch.
That is. Thank you very much again to the panel. As I said at the start, I was looking forward to hearing it, and I'm very glad that I did, really pushing further and further and continuing to make improvements. We are at lunch now. We have a number of sessions still going on, so we have a move in or move on demonstration, but we also have to celebrate Pride this month. We have a Pride lunch as well. So you can grab some food. It's in a room upstairs. It's a way to connect with the community and learn a little bit more, meet some new colleagues as well in a little bit of a different environment than a different atmosphere than what we would normally do. You might see I have a rainbow lanyard on. You might have seen a number of LGBTQI+ flags around as well. So if you would like to make your way there, please do so. Otherwise, lunch is served. We'll see you back again. We'll try to truncate the lunch so we can make it out on time. A reminder again too that RSVPs for IUA reception are closed. If you turn up and you have an RSVP, unfortunately you will be turned away. But that's okay. There's always next time. Enjoy lunch. Thank you very much.